On this edition of Native Report, we view an incredible art exhibit featuring a selection of artworks by 19 Minnesota-based artists.
We learn about the future development plans for the American Indian Community Housing Organization.
And we attend the unveiling of a unique utilitarian public art installation and learn about the story behind it. We also learn something new about healthy living and hear from our elders on this edition of Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Ernie Stevens.
And I'm Rita Aspinwall. Intersections is an art exhibit featuring a selection of contemporary artworks by 19 Minnesota-based Native artists, whose artworks have continued to influence each other in recent decades. This new exhibit is derived from the archives of the Twee Museum, which is located on the campus of the University of Minnesota Duluth.
The name Intersections occurred to me as I was looking through the collection. Part of the process as a curator is to see what we have to display that are similar, that intersect in regarding a lot of different themes.
These 44 works of art that make up the exhibit Intersections are very serious, yet many have a sense of whimsy, and are quite contemporary, yet have a sense of the traditional. All are visual reflections of the artist's experiences as Native people.
As I think of my own background as a Native person who grew up on a reservation, I'm very familiar with a lot of the themes that these artists are grappling with. There are 18 artists in Intersections, not including an installation above by local artist Jonathan Thunder. It was a big task, to see what's out there in our collection, both through a database and then also going through the collection itself and seeing which types of works I could focus on to include in this exhibition. We wanted to focus specifically on Minnesota Native artists after consulting with Jim Denemy, who is one of the artists in the exhibition and who gave us advice and about what he felt we should focus on for this exhibition. We kind of narrowed it down to probably about 4 different themes that a lot of the artists, if we were to categorize and break them down, that's what we came up with.
The list of artists is a who's who collection from around the region. The 4 themes present throughout the exhibit are nature, animals, cultural traditions, and social justice. So, Dr. Isaacs, if you would please, tell me what attracted you to this painting, please.
Well, the first thing I noticed was all the bright colors. I'm a fan of color and always loved Jim Denemy's use of color in his paintings. This one, the size as well is 12 foot by 7, and we had the special wall built specifically for this painting. It's a diptych. It's a 2-part sort of different types of imagery, similar but different. There are basically essentially 2 worlds here. You notice the real practical world on the bottom, where all these distractions are that sort of hinder the artist's creativity. And then as the artist is in the creative oven, this is another world here, which is the creative world. So it's, according to Jim, it's a place where all the artists go to become inspired. I've always been a fan of George Morrison, so anything that George Morrison does is amazing to me. Deani Whitehawk, we acquired a beautiful new work from her recently for this exhibition.
So what can you tell me, what drew you to this painting of Deani Whitehawk?
Yeah, it's a newer series that she's been working on, and what always draws me to her work is that she blends or merges sort of, traditional tribal design with abstraction. If you look closely, you can see that it's representative of quill work. It really sends a message, a statement about what Deani Whitehawk as the artist believes is important in terms of her artwork. If you look very closely, you'll see the very meticulous nature of Deani, and every little brush stroke is quite impressive.
Even though Dr. Isaacs used the term traditional in talking about the works of art, there is a distinction to be made.
I think the word traditional is actually not appropriate. I think historical is more appropriate because it sort of breaks down that dichotomy of traditional versus contemporary. When in reality, I think a lot of Native artists, past and present, have always sort of blended or merged sort of this historical aspect of tribal culture, Native history, Native art, and merged it with something that they come up with themselves as individuals, while still having this responsibility to their communities. It's always ongoing. Well, in looking at our collection and who we have, I think the hardest part was choosing a smaller number of Native artists, all of whom we have in the collection. There's a reason why we collect them, is because they're all talented artists. It was hard to say to keep it within the state boundary of Minnesota when boundaries are not real. So it's hard to exclude Wisconsin artists, and I'm from Wisconsin, so I know a lot of these artists as well. I think the artists in this region have very distinct voices and visions, authentic voices and visions, and it's a great time to be able to collect these works and to be able to show them to others and share them and have people become educated through their visual imagery and the narratives that they have to tell. So we're very lucky that we've had the capacity to collect artwork as the largest collecting institution north of the Twin Cities.
An aneurysm is like a balloon in a blood vessel. Aneurysms form on the arterial or high pressure side of the circulation in places where a blood vessel is a little bit weaker. Depending on where they are, they might push on something and cause symptoms. Oftentimes, they don't cause any symptoms until they get so big they break. Your vascular system, in many ways, is no different than any hydraulic system or the plumbing system in your house or even a bicycle tire. All the pipes and hoses will wear out over time. That will happen faster if the pressure is too high, and all those systems are designed to operate at a certain pressure. Aneurysms often occur in the brain, aorta, back of the knee, spleen, and intestine. A ruptured aneurysm can result in internal bleeding or stroke, and sometimes can be fatal. If an aneurysm is found, there are several options. Treatment of aneurysms depends on their size and location and can range from watchful waiting to surgery. Endovascular coiling is used for brain aneurysms and involves a catheter inserted into an artery and directed to the aneurysm. A thin platinum coil is placed at the opening into the aneurysm, and this causes a blood clot to form and blocks further blood flow into the aneurysm. Depending on the size of the aneurysm, more than one coil might need to be used. Clipping an aneurysm is also used for aneurysms in the brain. This requires a part of the skull to be removed to gain access to the artery. A microscope is used to help, and the clip is placed on the artery just before the aneurysm, and this stops blood flow. The part of the skull that was removed is put back on, and this is a permanent repair. For larger aneurysms in the abdomen or chest, there are two main options. Stenting involves a catheter threaded into an artery in the groin and directed to the aneurysm. A collapsed stent or graft is inserted into the aneurysm and is expanded to fit snugly into the aorta. Recovery time is 1 to 3 days. Surgery may be needed to fix more complicated aneurysms, and this involves an open incision into the chest or abdomen. The aneurysm and a portion of the aorta are removed and a graft is sewn into place. These grafts are usually Dacron or Teflon, and the recovery time is longer. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force recommends one-time ultrasound screening for abdominal aortic aneurysms in men ages 65 to 75 years who have ever smoked. The evidence is not sufficient to recommend screening in women ages 65 to 75 who have ever smoked. Keeping your blood pressure and cholesterol in good control can go a long way in preventing aneurysms from becoming a problem. If you have diabetes, good blood glucose control is also important. Non-traditional tobacco use? Smoking very much affects the circulatory system, and this is another reason to quit smoking. Your healthcare provider can help you with that. Remember to call an elder. They've been waiting for your call. I'm Dr. Arnie Vainio, and this is Health Matters.
Next, the American Indian Community Housing Organization, also known as ACO, is a Duluth, Minnesota nonprofit organization that is the result of a collective vision of Native American women in Duluth, Minnesota. Since its inception, ACO has developed a wide range of programming and continues to develop more programming to meet the needs of the local Native community.
In the heart of Duluth, Minnesota, is the Gamaji Building, owned and operated by the American Indian Community Housing Organization, or ACO. It is the only provider of culturally specific housing and services in northeastern Minnesota.
ACO started because there were two community members that had left a meeting up at Damiano, which is like a local, like basic needs, at that time probably was like the soup kitchen and like free clothing, and that they left the meeting and they're in the parking lot talking. How come we don't have space to meet? Their meeting space is in a parking lot. And so like for Native people, I think to have community space is huge. I can't understate that. Our mission is to honor the resiliency of Indigenous people, right, and to strengthen community. So we have a very broad mission, but I think it's focused in the right direction because we know that there's a lot of disparities, right, negative disparities, right, with poverty and health outcomes and you name it. Our disparities are all in those areas we don't want to be in. There are a lot of negative things going on in our community, but the thing that we really need to pay attention to are those key elements that kept us together and kept us intact. Like we're still here. I mean, a lot of people think that we don't exist. They think that we got destroyed, but we haven't, and we're strong and we're healthy and we're growing. And so we put that into practice in our programming and the way that we move forward. We're here in the Gamaji Building, which is a mixed-use building. This program has won national awards for creative placemaking. And that's because we have permanent supportive housing here. So we have 29 units on site. And then what that means is we have anywhere from 30 to 40 adults, but we have anywhere from 40 to 50 kids at any given time that live here. This is their home. Then we have our rooftop, which we use for community space. We have garden boxes, so that's our urban garden. And then last year we put up a solar panel array and a large-scale public art piece in the form of a mural of a water protector.
In addition to providing supportive and transitional housing, ACO is seeking to broaden its economic base by developing business enterprises on and off-site.
Opening that small space, the Indigenous First space, we opened last July. We generated over $100,000 in revenues in the first year. And a third of that is going to inventory, which goes to artists, and a third of it is going directly to artists, and then a third of it's going to ACO for programming. So it's that social impact. Social enterprises are those business startups with a social impact as the goal. And one of the things is, as nonprofits always struggle with, is we're grant dependent, which means that when a lot of times grant sources you might have a relationship with, but at some point they want you to become fiscally independent, right? And then also you're dependent on state and federal funds, and if that funding gets cut, then you have to still maintain your operations. So we, 2015, ACO bought a property in Lincoln Park. We are going to renovate it and turn it into an Indigenous coffee shop with art retail space. And that's the new craft district, and that's going to be a really important space to be in. And then in February, we went up to the 4th Street Market. It's been sitting vacant for the last 2 years. We took a walk through the 4th Street Market and we thought, we don't have any retail space where we can be selling indigenous food. We need to have access to it, and there's a lot of food producers out there. So we were able to secure that property. We were able to purchase it, and it was really because our board was willing to invest in that dream. It seems like it's a departure for ACO because we're known for doing housing, right, and direct services, but really within our mission is to strengthen that resiliency and strengthen our community.
The organization has come a long way since its inception, and the ACO administration and staff are working to ensure they will be there for all communities in and around Duluth.
When we started talking about our economic future, it goes back to like our traditional practices around our food, our shelter, and then the way that our people express themselves, right? So then we use the sweetgrass braid as our metaphor because it's like, again, like it's our housing, it's our arts and culture, and then it's our indigenous food. They're distinct, they're separate, but they overlap, they support each other, and that actually that sweetgrass is like a path forward, right? That's an old teaching. That's our road forward. ACO is community space, and that's something I think that ACO offers this community, is the space for us to be ourselves and to really stand in ourselves. And I think that that's what's really important here.
I'm always doing historical research. I love the historical photographs, the sepia toned. I'm in particularly always aware of the Great Lakes photographs, maybe because I'm always looking for my relatives who I could be related to, trying to connect my ancestors to who we are today. I also just like to look at the photographs of Indians or natives who really enjoy fashion and who did back in the day. So we were always decked out. The beadwork that we did is so amazing and magnificent and so detail oriented that I want to bring that into the show so everybody can appreciate who we were back in the day, and then make the connection from that fashion to what we're showing and what they're seeing on the runway.
A unique public art installation of window coverings by artist Sarah Agaton Howes serves two purposes. First, they are sunshades, and second, and probably most important, they help tell the story about the Ojibwe Nation that has made the lands around Lake Superior their home for centuries. The chill of a cool fall day didn't deter a group from gathering outside of the Ordine building in downtown Duluth for the unveiling of a window display inspired by the stories of the Ojibwe Nation. The display was designed by artist Sarah Agaton Howes.
I went and asked some folks I know who know stories about Duluth, like traditional stories, and the meanings behind the names of Duluth, like Masabekong. I went and asked and gifted somebody, asked them, tell me about what does Masabekong mean and why do we call Duluth Masabekong? And they told me about the Masabe and the creatures that live here and how they help protect us and protect the woods. And so I started thinking about all of the stories that are sort of underneath the surface of Duluth, that when you know, you come here and you see Duluth, but you often don't get the stories that are underneath, the stories that are like the original stories of this place. Another story that I heard was about how Chief Buffalo called Duluth the center of all good things. That because of the wetland area and because of the plentiful wild rice that was here, all the animals are here, that this was the center of all good things, all good life, and that there's so much that was here. I took wetland flowers, wetland plants, and when you're looking from far away, that's what you'll see, is those wetland plants. But when you look close up, there are pictographs that are, there's an opaqueness to them, and you can't see them from far away, but when you're in the courtyard and when you're close up, you can see these pictographs, and those pictographs are our stories. Part of the idea for me was that as Anishinaabe people, we're not often seen But we are always have been here, we're always here. And sometimes to find our stories, you have to look closer. You have to ask those questions. You have to look a little deeper. And that underneath everything that's happening, we're always there. Our stories are always there. So that's what's in when you come up close and engage closely with the art that will be on those 5 windows on the building.
The commissioned work is a collaboration between the Ordian Foundation and the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council.
ARAC moved into this building last December, and we thought that this was a perfect building to have some more art to it, that it would really add to the feeling that we wanted to create here. And we wanted also to make sure that we had a feeling of openness to artists and this was an art-friendly place. And so we began thinking about what artists that we'd given grants to who might really do a good job, and we invited a couple of them to submit proposals for to decorate the windows. I know that from reading a report on indigenous places in Duluth that this is a very significant part of town, and that having an artist who could understand that and create art that's very sympathetic to its long history is really something that we were excited by. I just love that you can take that story and turn it into this beautiful art with these flowers that are both beautiful and meaningful. And so that's what to me, it's very exciting that this is art that has this multiple levels of meaning to it.
I really see artists as our storytellers and our truth tellers and our courageous voices in a community, in any community. It is often our artists who are really expressing what is hope, what is our history, what is fear, what is determination. And art is something that everybody can connect to. And I think often we forget that art, sometimes people want to presume that art is this very high-end element you can't attach to. Art is for everybody. So my hope is that this can bring some people of non-Native culture closer to understanding the relevance of Native culture, of Anishinaabe culture, of the ground we walk on, and how much of that is shared. And a true appreciation for, the fact that we are a nation of immigrants that have come from other places onto a land where people had been existing for years, right? And so knowing our humility and our place in that as well. For me, as mayor, it is a huge part of what fuels me in my work, but I think it's a really important part of connection in this community.
This adds to the public art in and around the city, and the mural serves 2 purposes. They offer privacy and shade to those using the rooms inside.
Part of what I've been told is that our florals come from medicines and foods. That's where the origin of those designs comes from. So usually if I'm kind of come up with a design, I'll look at those flowers and I draw them right on my Surface Pro, right on my computer in the Adobe programs, and then I'll spend endless hours moving those around and shaping them. And the pictographs are sort of my interpretation of those stories. They're not necessarily pulled from rocks, you know what I mean, or they're more my interpretation of those stories, but in that have that rusty color that pictographs have, and it's on birch bark, because when you know about the best supplies for something, birch bark is like the perfect supply. It lasts forever. You can sit it in water and it'll last forever. And we also always kept our stories on birch bark. Scrolls and all those things are used for memory. So that's part of why I picked birch bark for the windows. And it's this cool combination of like a very old stories and old art and traditional art with very contemporary, very like high-tech way of installing a shade on a window, which I love that convergence of old school and contemporary. Like that's just totally what I think is great about us as Anishinaabe people too, is that we are that convergence of tradition and modern. That's who we are. So I love that combination of those two. Our country as a whole is in a weird spot right now where it's very divisive, and I think right now in Duluth we have a really cool mayor, and she's pretty like hip to what's important in the Native community and thinks these things are important. This is a good step for Duluth to take, because we also have a lot of work to do to rebuild as a community. There's a lot of damage here, and there's a lot of hurt, and there's a lot of racism. And, you know, if we can, this can be one more step, hopefully, in us like acknowledging the humanity in each other. That would be beautiful.
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us on the web at nativereport.org, on Facebook, and on Twitter.
Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors across Indian Country. I'm Rita Aspinwall.
And I'm Ernie Stevens. Join us next time for Native Report.
Rita Aspinwall is an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and is an ICWA social worker with Fond du Lac Social Services. Ernie Stevens is a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and is a film and television producer. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.